Good morning, everybody. And I'm saying good morning because it's early morning, 8 a.m. for me in Chicago. It's an evening for you. So good morning, good evening to everybody. Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Akash, for inviting me to this festival. Um, India and Calcutta hold a very dear place in my heart. I was just saying to them before everybody was admitted how how eager I am to come back to India one more time when all these troubles are over. Thank you for participating in the festival. I'm also grateful for the ability that we have to meet at least like this virtually and to have some connection and some meaningful presentations, conversations, interactions, contributions, however we want to call them. So um, I'm going to speak about a topic that for number of years I was asked right after sort of the period of participating in numerous competitions. I participated in international guitar competitions from about age of 18 until about, I think, 27, quite intensely, maybe about, I don't know, more than 30, 40 competitions, I cannot remember. And I remember distinctly the state of mind and things that I was thinking as I was going from the first competition to the very last. How has my approach uh, changed in those years and what I was thinking? Reason being, obviously, the sort of like a high level pressure in those situations. So I'm also going to send a few questions in the chat. And as I'm speaking, I would like you to answer those questions. They will be sorted out by our sort of technician of the day, Nikilesh, who's going to be helping us. And I want to gear this towards the end of this presentation, a little bit more specific based on your answers, meaning whether you whether your students, your experience of how many years you have been performing, what is your next objective, you see the questions there, etc. So right off the bat, concept of music and performance or competition. Um, very often, people also, there are many people that say, I think that the competition and music do not work together. It's a contradictory term. And in one way, they are right. We cannot compare art. You cannot say that one painting is better than another. You cannot say that one composition is better than another. However, we also have our personal preferences in a sense that we can say, I do prefer this work of art over the other. I do have a favorite composer. I do have a favorite composition. Uh, that shapes our taste. Also, there are certain other things that are very quantifiable um, in a sense that, yes, we can determine if somebody plays faster than some other person, right? We can quantify the tempo. We can quantify the number of mistakes. We can quantify quality of simply execution of the piece. So those are some things that we can talk about as well. Again, I'm saying as a quantifiable things that are valid in a sense of comparison. Now, when the comparison occurs and when we are subject of comparison, when we submit ourselves to the situation where um, somebody compare us to somebody else and when they judge us, that tends to bring a great deal of self-consciousness, and it starts our mind, it turns it on to all sorts of questions, all sorts of doubts that start uh, like eating up in our brain and are um, not conducive to a better performance, but quite the contrary. So I do not know if I have met that many people in my career that would tell to me I'm not nervous. Quite the opposite is the thing. Even the performers and the players that we all highly, highly admire, and even if we see them on the stage that they perform with such a great sense of control and musicality, um, if you ask them, were you nervous? Surprisingly, you would get an answer, yes, I am very nervous, or yes, I was very nervous, or mostly I am, and there are some performances that are not. Uh, Personally, if you ask me, percentage of the performances that I have done in my life, like how many times I was nervous versus how many times I was not nervous at all when I perform, I would say, more than 90% of my time on the stage, I was under some kind of pressure and being nervous, and I had to work hard in controlling or focusing my mind on the right things that would be helpful for my performance. So, um, if we have a lots of people who are here going to competitions, so let me assume something because I cannot read all the chats, but you're either preparing for a competition or are performing for some kind of performance. Performance can be either you're performing, perhaps not now in this situation, but you're performing a recital or performing a solo or chamber music, or you're preparing for an exam, or you're performing at a concert in joint concert in the school or university, um, any sort of performance. We have a goal, we have to perform that, we get nervous, right? So sometimes we can choose our performances, sometimes we can choose our competitions. So if some of you or most of you are preparing for competition, um, choosing a competition is a very important thing as well, in the sense that you don't want to start your competition experience with sort of like the hardest competitions or the most known, which will attract the best players. So I would always advise, like with any venture, start at something that is closer to your levels. Try out locally, or in your own state or in your own country before you go to any international competitions. It gives you a taste of what is it about, and also like an experience. You go through few that you gather the experience before you are ready to move on. The same thing goes for other performances, and I will address that later a little bit more. Um, when we think about the first step, or at least first few steps that we are doing before we get to the final performance, obviously all of us are, let's say, learning and continue to learn things about our playing, about our instruments, about our technique, and about musicality. Very often there's one important um, element that I have come across, and that was one of the biggest hurdles to being relaxed on the stage, and that's your selection of repertoire. Oftentimes I have seen students, players, many times also guitar aficionados, right? People who are not professionals but play guitar for pure pleasure and fun, uh, where the case of selection of the repertoire, in my opinion, was way off, meaning that students would either themselves choose or their teachers would choose way too difficult piece for them. So my philosophy is you have to get to know what is your level of playing and to carefully choose the repertoire that can highlight the best about you as a player at that particular stage, and not to challenge yourself too much and not to get in trouble by selecting the pieces that are at that current moment way too hard for you to perform. If we as a humans always need a certain level of challenge, we always need something to sort of like a grasp for, something that is beyond our grasp and that we are always reaching and extending towards. In that sense, we are growing. Now, if something that we are working for, it's way too far out of our reach, we know that we are going to fail. So that's extremely important, the choice of your repertoire. So my next question to you would be, think and reflect on your current repertoire, and maybe if we start interacting, you can let me know what is it you play and how do you feel, where is your level, where is your repertoire. Again, my teaching philosophy is that I would give to my students a repertoire that is 1 or 2 steps ahead of their level, so that they can start closing the gap little by little. So the repertoire little harder, then they close it up, and then so on and so forth. Oftentimes, our institutions, schools, universities, colleges, etc., are guided by a certain program, in a sense that you have to complete a certain list of pieces in order to complete first year or second or whatever it is that it's given in those requirements for that program. I personally have a hard time with that because I think that this kind of development, given the fact that playing an instrument is such a complex task, and that we have a individual music lessons. They are not group lessons. We do have a group lessons, but the more serious you become with your playing, you start having individual lessons. And that's not the case with many other things that we learn. Usually we learn in a class, in a group of people. So why individual? Because it is a highly personalized approach to how each student at whatever level you are, and the complexity of technique and musicality is such that lessons have to be tailored in that way, in the individual way. So that's why I would say I'm proponent of having those guidelines in place in terms of level of difficulty and repertoire that we have to complete for our exam or university or school or whatever, but also on teachers' discretion that can be changed to better suit to each student, because our job as a teachers is to guide the students through that path and to make that progress gradual. It is not, ultimately, music is not about competition. Music is about creating art and enjoying yourself. And if you enjoy yourself, then whoever listens to you is going to enjoy as well. If you suffer while you're playing, you will transmit that greatly to the audience as well. So let's talk about few things as we are preparing our repertoire, whether it is for a competition or a performance. One aspect to think about is to work on is a timbre, tone quality, our tone quality. I remember once when I asked one friend, he was a doctor, but was a guitar aficionado, and I asked him, why did you choose guitar? Why guitar? Why you are not drawn to piano or a violin or cello or some other instrument? And he said, it's because of the color of guitar, color of tone. And it made me think about it. Yes, guitar has a particular tone, and our classical guitar also have that particular tone. We have to think about in certain stuff aesthetics of the tone, quality of the tone when playing a certain music. We cannot use, let's say, sort of like a flamenco type of sound in the classical music, or vice versa. I remember also once when in during my studies, I was taking one ensemble. I think it was about Brazilian music and improvisation. And our coach would sort of ask us, guys, can you play with a little bit dirtier sound? Because all of us were playing with this sort of like a nice classical type of sound that did not feel right for whatever we were doing at that moment, a certain more popular type of music. So as I say, it goes vice versa. So when I say about tone quality, we are looking for a very beautiful tone that it's not too naily. If our nails are too long, it's going to be too harsh. Not to move our right arm too much towards the ponticello, that where the strings are more tight and become, it's too bright uh, tone. So that's again sense of aesthetics. How do we gain that sense of aesthetics? By listening lots of good players and paying attention to the quality of their tone. The same like when you're listening some singers, and you can clearly, you are drawn to some singers because the quality of their voice. Case in point, for example, Pavarotti, right? When we hear him and his recordings now, how what was color of his voice, it just melts us because it is so beautiful. So we can make quite a great strides in adjusting our hand to make that beautiful tone. So uh, I'm not going to discuss here exactly how, because it's impossible over Zoom. That is more in person thing when we are playing and when you can really hear in person. But I would assume that you all know what I'm talking about. So when you are playing, that's one of the main things to pay attention, the quality of your tone. Second is technique. Technique obviously is a very complex uh, issue, right? So again, not to go into a masterclass type of situation, but we have two hands, very different techniques for the left and for the right hand. All those aspects that we have in one piece, one has to break down into segments, into elements, and to very carefully work on those things to put them together. Because again, all your musicality is going to be based on the level of technique that you have. If you maybe want to make a comparison, technique, I would say it would be your vehicle. So the better vehicle you have, the less troubled the road is going to be, or your journey. Meaning, if your vehicle is in a good shape, if it's comfortable, if it doesn't have any issues that you're gonna be stopping and pausing, and if you can, you know, drive very fast and it's not gonna uh, break down or let you flip or something like that, your vehicle is stable, your technique is stable, that's great. Now, if you only focus on the technique and you only work on the technique and you don't add other musical aspects to it, then the journey itself becomes boring. In a sense, you're simply driving in circles, right? Like this NASCAR race here in the United States. You're just driving in a pure circle. You can get there faster. I don't mean to diminish it. I'm just saying that it is one objective. Um, for me, the music is like you take a great car and you take off onto a great journey. Um, very often, in when we listen somebody perform, those are the two aspects we are talking about. Oh, that he or she has a great technique. but I miss musicality. Or you can say, oh, this person is very musical, but his technique is not that great. So whenever there is some uh, objection to what we are listening, that's a negative point. So we think about those two things in the same way. Now, in the terms of technique, for most of us, it's very easy to again quantify certain things, whether it is a speed, whether it is accuracy, whether it is a synchronization of the left and right hand, whether it is a good free stroke or rest stroke or arpeggio or scales, or in the left hand, whether we have a good bar, whether we have a good slurs, whether we stretch our hand enough, whether we produce buzzes. So many things that we really can quantify and say, how does it work? In terms of musicality, how do we quantify that? What is actually music? Music can be, again, also quantified in several things. Musicality also rests on certain academic elements, right? Academic elements meaning that everything that we learn in the school, we start learning our notation, we start learning the name of the notes, we start learning the uh, scales, the keys, the harmonies, the counterpoint, musical form, shapes, dynamics, uh, agogics, or how do you call it, interpretation, articulation, so many things, historic content, aesthetics of each period, in the sense that we cannot play Baroque in the same way that we play Romantic music or any national music, like, Spanish nationalist music of Granados or Albanese, etc. So there are certain aesthetic principles within a genre that are in a way academic through learning that music and understanding and feeling it and then applying it to what we are playing. So there are many aspects that one has to think very hard, cognitively, very consciously, as we are developing our preparation in the process of learning. um, when some students have come to me and asked, hey, what's the best way to learn? My answer is always, find the best teacher you can and have lessons with that teacher, so that all this information is fed to you constantly, that after each lesson you can walk out of your lesson with a head full of information that you have to work on, process, sort out, and learn and build upon, right? So when we take a piece of music, when we start working on it, again, one part is thinking about these all technical aspects that I've just mentioned, and I have just mentioned a few. Obviously, there are more. And in the same time, think about all these musical aspects that together, as we work, they have to be worked together. And what that does, it is giving you a very solid foundation for your performance. Um, do not try to work in the stages in a sense that, let me read the piece through, let me learn the notes, then I will correct the fingerings, or my teacher is going to correct me the fingerings, then I will add the dynamics, then I will add the phrasing, then I will add the musical understanding, or conceptual understanding, or analyze the form, and then at the end, think about what does it mean in terms of music and emotions. I am pretty much the proponent of doing all these aspects right from the beginning, even if you take just one measure, or let's say one phrase, meaning 4, 8, or 16 measures, a phrase, that you're thinking about all those things in the same time. Think of it like a tapestry, like creating a beautiful fabric. In India, that's not foreign to you. You have all these incredible colors, you have all these incredible fabrics that you see every day, And the way they are woven is that all these different threads of different colors are woven in the same time into one pattern. And at the end, you have that piece of fabric or a composition that is together. So you don't go like, oh, let me just try first put a red thread in it. Then afterwards, I will put the golden one. Then after that, I will put a brown one and so on. No, you have to think about all the same things in the same time. You start working, you become conscious of all these aspects right in the beginning. The reason for that is very, very simple. If you learn first just the pitches of the note and the rhythm, your mind has already learned to perform a piece of music in a certain way. Your muscle, excuse me, are responding to that singular or reduced piece of information. And as such, your muscles are working in that way. Your mind is thinking in that way, in only one or two sort of like inputs that are given. When you want to bring in the dynamics, means you have to sort of like take apart what's already written and put something else in. And then if other element comes, then you again have to take it apart and put it back in. Meaning that your process, it's going to take longer. So don't practice fast. Don't learn the things just with a, trying to get the right pitches and to hit the right frets and to pluck the right strings. That's not the music yet. It has to be more complex than that. Once we have established our all let's say all these plan of learning, what happens then is that through simple repetition and the complexity of that, as we play, we start memorizing. Sometimes you will memorize the piece without having to go into a specific memorization process. Sometimes you need to take a little more time in memorizing. And this is one of the also aspects that are difficult to, again, maybe quantify. Like, how do we memorize? Perhaps the memorization is different for different people. For me, what has worked is that just this simple process of repetition where the tactile memory starts to take over, meaning that my finger simply remembers. Obviously, it's not my finger, it is my mind. But that map of physical movement starts to take shape, and eventually the piece is memorized sort of by itself. Now, I'm sure that many of you have witnessed, many of us, including myself, we have witnessed those moments where we come on a stage and we play, and our mind just go blank, like you just stop. You do not know what's the next note that it's coming, right? And this is particularly the case, I would say, with music, contrapuntal music, Baroque music, specifically Bach. And I would imagine the reason for that is because we have all those different voices going on in the same time. So it's, in a sense, more complex. If you miss one note in the sequence of one voice, your fingers simply give you different information, and you find yourself making a wrong turn, and you, in a sense, stop. It's much easier to play different kind of music in terms of memorization than it is Baroque. So what can we do about that? Again, I go back to this other musical aspects that I've mentioned, sort of academic analysis, knowing what kind of piece you play, whether you're playing a prelude or a fugue or a jig or a double, just talking about few musical forms for Baroque. What does this, why is it important to know what kind of piece we play? It is important because it gives us the sense of structure. If we are talking about the prelude can have a different kind of structures. If you're talking about a fugue, we know that we have this subject, right, that starts and then it modulates to a different key. How many times does it come back? We are tracing that subject. Again, it gives us this structure where it is. We are starting to recognize it, not only thinking that playing the notes, but starting to figure out certain segments, as I say, the subject, or let's say a melody, where it is at one stage, at what point does it start with this note or a that note, in this key or a that key. Talking about the keys, harmonic structure, knowing in what key do we play, knowing what is our harmonic progression. That also gives us, like, certain parameters, certain like uh, pillars, harmonic pillars, that we can orient ourselves and know in what key are we and what is the next uh, chord or next harmony we are getting into. Form, structured, whether it is a binary piece, A and B, whether it is ABA, oftentimes as well, right? Whether we have a like introduction and then A section, then the B, whether we have a coda after that. Oftentimes that's the case as well. So this gives us a broader sense of where it is. When we start understanding that, that helps us also to zoom in on the smaller and smaller segments. So from a bigger structure, let's say a few, and we know that we have ABA, then we can zoom only on the A section. Then we are able to, through the harmonic analysis, understand that A section has maybe 2 or 3 major sections, and that it modulates. It starts in A minor, then it goes to E major, then it goes to D minor, then whatever, it comes back to A minor. So we are breaking down that bigger A sections into smaller sections. Then you take that smaller section and you analyze that. If we talk in terms of fugue, where's my subject? Where does it go? From where does it, in which, how do I recognize that voice? Am I aware that this is one voice and this is another one? And I'm not thinking about this note in this voice that it connects to this one, but there's 2 different voices. How am I going to play them in terms of dynamic, or in terms of expressivity, or in terms of articulation? So all those little things that you are putting your analysis and your mental preparation and understanding into, it's also feeding you back the sense of security that you can rely upon and be more aware of knowing the piece, not only by what your fingers are doing, but your mental understanding, what is it about. Then we go to the physical aspects. When I was competing, one of the things that I would do as a preparation would be to run my program maybe a week before or a few days ago, and even a night before my performance. I would run it in my head without my instrument. And what would go in my head would be to hear the music going on and to envision my left hand fingers playing. So if I'm playing, I don't know, one of the things I was competing a lot with, Leo Brouwer, the Camero Negro, so I'm seeing my hand working. And there will be times when, for example, I would come to one passage and I can hear it, but I cannot envision the finger, which way I'm going. In that instance, I would go to take my music, score, look at it, remind myself that this is, again, I'm emphasizing, this is going all without guitar in my hand. It's all just checking my memory. I look at the score, I envision it where it is. I said, okay, here it is. I see. And I go with the score a few times. Then I take score away. I again backtrack a couple of measures before, and I go through that, what I call the trouble spot or a black hole, right? Because when we blank, it just feels like that, total void. So I would check those black holes, every one of them. And it could be that if I have to play a program that is about 15 minutes, it would usually take me about 3 times longer to go through that in my head. So if you have to play a recital that is 16 minutes long, it's very difficult to do the entire program, to run it in your head in one sitting. If it takes you 3 hours, that's long. Some people can do it faster, I'm sure. But thinking about the music in that way, thinking about memorization, thinking about each movement, hearing it, it's also a tremendously tiring exercise, mentally tiring. So that's why I like to break it up. So 15 minutes at a time, just go through that. If it takes you 1 hour, great. You will simply become better and better with this. You know, and you can run one program several times, and you will also notice how as you do that, you become better and better. Then what you will notice is that you're getting a tremendous sense of security, that you will stop worrying about blanking out on the stage, because you have that backup system. Your mind knows where to go. You can, when you start playing, you can let go, but in any moment, if that voice starts coming, like, what's next note, what's coming up next, what's coming up next, you know, okay, even if you're coming, if this voice comes and tells what's coming up next, you say, I know what's coming up next. I have practiced enough. Even if my fingers don't know, I have this backup system, I know what it is. Very difficult exercise, but incredibly effective. Incredibly effective. Next thing on top of that, what comes is, I would say, like all these things that I have just talked about, it comes a point when we are getting on a stage and we don't want to think about any of these things anymore. This is just all our construct, our frame to support the music. And what is the music essentially? It's your own expression. It's you being very free, us being very free to simply play and not to think about anything. If you have not done all these things, if you have not done all your homework, if you were not diligent, your sense of security, your way of expressing will also be limited. When it comes then again to performance and to playing, the best way sort of to play is to get lost, right? When we are in a flow and we are playing, we are not thinking about anything. Another thing in the terms of preparation that helps me is to think about a piece in the context of what does it mean to me? What do I think when I play it? What does it evoke in me when I play that piece? What this piece of music wants to be. In a case of, again, I go back to this piece, let's say Leo Brouwer. It's a very descriptive piece, El Decameron Negro, the Black Decameron, collection of stories from Africa. First movement, El Arpa del Guerrero, warrior's harp. What is it about? It's about a warrior who has gotten tired of fighting and wars and wants to play his harp. So in a sense, I hear this duality between different parts. I start finding how does Brouwer depicts warrior-like sound and character, and how he depicts harp-like person who's playing. It's more gentle, more lyrical. And you start recognizing those places. Then you start igniting your imagination. You think about that story. You create visually that character in your mind. You create that story. Remember, for example, when you're watching movies, and if you would watch a movie without the music, it would take such a dimension away from it that you would not be able to enjoy it almost at all. And the way the music is created is sort of at the end of the whole process. You write a script, you shoot the movie, and then when when you're doing the editing, you start adding the music to it. So music serves the story. It elevates the emotions of that particular moment in the story. So composer has to know how to, with what kind of sounds, but what kind of melody, how to enhance the emotion of that segment. We can think the other way around. We have the music. Now we have to create the script. We have to write, we have to imagine the story that we are playing. So for some kind of music, it's easier. That music is more evocative to perhaps creating a story. Some music perhaps not. If we think about fugue again, by Bach, does it give us a particular story? Perhaps, perhaps not. Does it give a certain abstract images? Yes. Or do we also simply think about a intensity of emotions? What kind of emotions are linked to that phrase or linked to that entire sections? How do we express that? What does it mean to feel excited? What does it mean to feel deeply involved in a sense of whether it is simplifying it here, right? Whether it is happy or sad, right? Those are the easiest ways to simplify. Or when we start breaking it out even more, like, sadness, what kind of things we can put under that umbrella? Melancholy, nostalgia, hurt, pain, loss, uh, yearning, just name it. Happiness, what kind of things we can put under that? Being ecstatic, being joyful, being exhilarated, whatever it is, you again create a number of, let's say again, quantifiable emotions that you can say to yourself, I feel specifically this. How does that emotion grow? How does it transform something else? So you start linking your emotional response to those parts. You can be doing this on a very instinctive level. You just play something and you feel one way or another. That's great. That's the premise of it all. Everything I'm talking about is like, after effect, analyzing this. But what helps us is also to create that understanding, to create that world of our own, world of emotions, world of music, something abstract that we create in our mind, that when we practice, we are also conscious of it. We are practicing the sense of musicality, the presence of that universe that we create in ourselves. When we create that, when we can recognize it, when we are aware of it, then when we go on a stage, we can evoke it more
I have a
clearly.
question.
Yes.
Regarding what you said about having feelings and emotions regarding a certain piece, I'm currently working on Prelude in D major by Bach on the guitar, originally for the cello.
Mhm.
And how much should you respect the style of that era and that composer, as opposed to how much you would love to feel and express that piece? Am I clear?
You're very clear, and it's a great question. Now, I will flip it the other way around. When you say, how much should I respect the era and the style of that music, then the same thing would go for other kind of music. How much should you respect, Brouwer
Hmm.
and or Rodrigo or whatever it is, or whether it is even more contemporary composer, Berio. How much should you respect that or express your emotions? Those two things go hand in hand, meaning that within the style, playing with a certain type of style,
Hmm.
like in this instance with Bach, you cannot play this piece in a romantic style. You cannot play it like with overly too much time taking, when you are playing
Rubato.
it,
Yes.
right? Yeah. But what that music say, what is evoked to you, then you sort of zero in on that emotion. So you're expressing yourself deeply within a style.
Hmm.
So don't confuse that, my expression means that I can change the style. That's not what it is about. you're finding the pathway of doing the style but still expressing. So let's talk specifically about that. What's the emotion that arises in you when you play this piece in the beginning, for example, right?
Well, it comes to me when I play and when I listen to it. There's a sort of
Yeah.
serenity in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Serenity, you said.
Yes, serenity
Okay,
and
so let's define that. For example, serenity, like, how serene can you become?
well,
That's the trick. You understand what I mean? It's not about, how, if you think about serenity, if you think about, let's say, meditation, of what does the serenity mean to you? How, where you can imagine yourself be, what place puts you in a sense of serenity? Whether you think, okay, I'm in a temple and I'm meditating and I'm playing this music, or I'm back in time, and I'm in the 18th century Europe, sitting in a church listening, somebody playing this music or something like that, right? So you get that, you in a sense measure how serene you can become through that music, until it starts developing a certain other emotion uh, rises up, right? Because as the music progresses, and specifically with Bach, I love this idea of serenity in the beginning. I agree with that, right? And until it becomes more exciting, when it's
yes.
driving you towards points where you when you hit that A7 chord
Mm,
and there's a fermata, you
yeah.
are at that spot, at a different spot, and when the whole sort of like a B section, now I'm talking about sort of like improvisatory, da
Yes.
da 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 dee dee da da dee dee da 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 dee dee da dee da dee da dee ba dee da dee, right? You can be as excited about that peak note in that piece as you can be, in a Shostakovich symphony. And the styles are completely different, but emotion is the same. Why is the emotion the same? Because we are talking about people,
Mm,
right? Bach wasn't less emotion than was Stravinsky.
mm,
Characters can be different,
mm,
introverted, extroverted, so on. We express more or less things, but emotions, we all feel them the same. How we express them could be different. Now, in terms of performance, we
mm.
as a performers have to practice the art of performance, of expressing those emotions, because if you go to the theater or if you see the actors, right, they are performing. So in that way, we are also enhancing our expressive abilities and expressing those emotions within the context of the style.
I
Does
see.
that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're very welcome. So that goes again for every music. And um, as I go back to this about when people ask me, how do I learn the best? And I say, find the best teacher you can. So all those things are explained to you in a way that you can go out of the lesson and say, like, I understand this. It's clear to me. I know what I have to do. Very
Well,
specific instructions on how you have to do, even like something like this that you have just asked.
mm.
Yeah.
As a music educator myself,
Hmm.
when you're teaching a small child, or let's say 6 to 10, and then 10 to 13 and teenagers, in what intensity or depth should you explain these things that are so important as history and style and emotions? Because how would you explain that to those age groups?
Uh, Fantastic question. Now, in any kind of education, when we educate a younger person, uh, our understanding of the matter obviously is greater than the person we are teaching that subject to, right? And I'm not talking only about guitar and music. We also, I think the task of an educator is to understand, to get to know the student, to understand how that student thinks and feels. Where is, how big the world of understanding of that person is at that uh, developmental stage of their life,
Maturity, basically.
right? So if you're talking about a kid who's a 6 or 7 year old, right? You're not gonna talk in terms that person, that kid cannot understand. So you have to go to the sort of basically that level, engage, talk, understand what they are thinking about, and relate to their world, to their understanding, right? So if they are super excited about playing soccer, for example, how you can ask, how do you feel when you score a goal,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And then they can understand that emotion. Oh,
mm.
I feel like, oh, okay, so can you play this note like if you'll be scoring a goal?
Yeah,
Da 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 bam, yeah, goal.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That's sort of like the relations I would
Wow.
make.
Thank you so much. Sorry if I
You're
went.
very well. No, 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 not at all. I like the question. So let me just finish up a few more things I wanna say about this subject, and then let's open it more the last half an hour for this question and answers. And again, please, I do not know how many of you are here. 79. Jesus. If we have 79 questions, we'll be here through the night, right? But anyways, I do invite you to give the questions. Think about, I really want to encourage you about one thing. Do not feel reluctant to ask a question. Do not feel, let me just put this word out there, timid or ashamed to ask any question, because every question is a super valid. Okay? So, I talked about this imagination, right? Creating these worlds, creating, associating within our own world, our own experience. And this was a great segue, when you talk about different um, ages, that you understand in your, as an educator, or as your yourself as a person, understanding your emotions, understanding your emotional world, and linking your life experience to the music you are playing. That is your own world that you bring to the stage, that you enjoy yourself, and by that you are transmitting music, you are transmitting your humanity to uh, uh, to the audience, and that's where the interaction happens. um, Next thing that is also very important is that we practice this, meaning we have to practice performance. We have to go on stage and perform and perform and perform and perform, and we learn from our experiences. I remember when I was living in the Netherlands and preparing for competitions, there were some instances in our performing classes where I would go and perform, and performance went very well. And I was like, great, I'm ready. I'm ready to go to a competition and play really well because I just played very well and I have that confidence, right? That was great. That was great experience. Then there would be some other instances where I would play, and then, I play Renaissance music, Dowland, poof, blank, shit, I don't know, And after the class, I'm like, I'm not ready. The competition is next week. I just messed up. Frustration. Then thinking, okay, where was the mistake? Why did I make a mistake? Is it something that I usually make a mistake about? Is it because of memory? Is it because of wrong fingering? Does this passage, when I play at home, go flawlessly and I have no problem, but I just forgot it and I have to work on memory? Or is this a tricky passage that I usually have a trouble with? If it is, I need to refinger it. I have to relearn it. I have to do something else about it. Examine it very carefully. So then again, that bad experience, bad moment actually turns into a good experience because it has showed me where were my flaws and give me opportunity to make an adjustment and make it better for when it counts really in a performance, right? So perform as much as you can, whether it is, you set your own time that for yourself, you say, I'm going to perform, I'm going to record myself, that's it. It's a performance time, it's not practice time. Whether you perform for your parents or for your siblings or for whoever, or your friends or for your colleagues, for your peers in a school performance class, have as many as you can. So put yourself hard at work to set the performances, as many as you can, and work on them. Now, there's something about psychology. What happens to us when we go on the stage and you sit there and your mind starts becoming like a little gremlin, just talking all these negative things. Geez, I'm nervous. My hands are sweating. My hands are trembling. Who's listening to me? Oh my God, is that person or that person, or is this guitarist, or it's my professor, it's another professor. Oh, that professor who's really very harsh, he's gonna fail me, or like an enormous amount of, I would call it, the garbage thoughts that our mind starts igniting. And I remember, became aware of those things. And I'll tell you one thing, like what you can also feed your mind, or starve it, not completely to death, but starve it enough so that it becomes quieter, that part of your mind. When I went to very first competitions, I would go register. I pick up the brochure from the competition. I go like, Aniele Desiderio, Zoran Dukic, Pavel Stadl, this and that person. I'm like, Jesus Christ, all these people, oh my God, all these fantastic, next, oh my God. So I fed myself information about who am I competing against. Did I do myself any favor? Not at all. Quite the contrary. I was just feeding my mind all those unnecessary information. And I started to realize, like, what is actually the only thing that matters to me when I play? It's not about who else is there. It's not about who's listening to me. It's not about who's in the jury. It's not about anything except me being able to play at my best. So to the point that towards the end of that period of competitions, I would register, present myself, hi, I'm here. When is my time to play? Where do I play? That's all I need to know. Bye. And then I come and I am at the place at the time when I need to be. And that went so far as to the point that I remember one guitarist who came to me and said, yeah, I was in your GFA jury. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't remember, because I did not want to know who was in my jury. I excluded all the information that would only distract me from my playing. So I did not know who was competing. I did not know who was judging. I did not want to know. And I prevented myself from I prevented that information coming to my head, because it would only open the doors to kind of thinking that would only undermine my performance. So the only thing that would enhance my performance would be introspect about all these things I said before, thinking about the music, thinking about imagination, thinking about emotions, thinking about doing the best I can at that moment. So that doesn't mean that I did not learn a great deal from observing other competitors. I learned tremendous amount, because it's a great inspiration. When you hear somebody playing really fantastically well, it starts, it makes you think how he or she is doing that. Great phrasing, great interpretation, so on. So after I would play my round, or after I would finish, then I would go and listen to others to learn. So you put it in that context as well. Day of the performance, I have also learned that I cannot say, okay, my performance is at 7 p.m. I have to be in the hall at 6, but until 6 p.m. I have entire day to do this, 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 do this. Whether it is, go for a hard exercise, or whether it is to finish up on my emails, or finish on this project or that project. What I have also noticed later on in my days of performing and the concerts, then on the days when I would have a concert in the evening, but I spent the entire day working on other things, by the end of the day I became tired. So when you become tired, your mind doesn't have energy to invest into performance. So what is also important is that the day of your performance, you're resting. You're resting physically, you're resting mentally, especially mentally. I mean, obviously, you're not going to go and climb a mountain on the day of performance, right? But don't go to the gym. Don't do too hard things that in any way your body is going to ache, and that again will take away from your mind. So day of the performance, take it easy, rest, relax, think of yourself that you're preparing for yourself for an important evening, and you have to like take care of your body and your mind towards it. In terms of eating as well, don't go on feasting before you're going to go perform. If we eat too big of a meal, what do? We go and sleep. Our blood is drawn to our stomach. So, again, see what works for you. Usually people say, and you have seen it oftentimes with the tennis players, they eat a little bite of a banana. So when we said to one colleague, and I remember 20 years ago, like, what shall I eat before a concert? Well, have a banana. The guy went and ate 10 bananas before the concert. A little bit too much, right? So everything in moderation. Yeah, so anyways, exclude the things that you don't need to. Also be aware that when you start having those thoughts, don't fight them in a sense like, oh God, why am I thinking this? Why am I? It's not you who are thinking it. It's your mind that is thinking it. And you can recognize these negative thoughts. I sort of like a made analogy, like when you're tuning into a radio. Now, many of you do not even know what is radio anymore, because we don't listen to things on the radio. We listen to them on the internet or on a podcast or whatever. Tune yourself to a positive frequency. Recognize when your mind starts talking self-doubt. Recognize it and say, I know you're here. Thank you very much. I don't need you. It's good to have that. It has some evolutionary purpose, I'm sure. But I have done all my work that I don't need you. So where do I want to be? On all these things I have just discussed in the past hour, especially emotions and imagination. So whenever you are playing and your mind goes like, who's listening to me? No. You yourself go, thank you, but I don't want to be there. I want to turn to music. I want to listen to myself. I want to turn to music. And it's a constant back and forth during the performance. And the more you become familiar with that, the more you practice, the easier it will be for you to turn this way, the way you want, towards your performance, and staying there a little bit longer. Every time you will stay a little bit. When you feel the pull, you will be able to recognize it and get yourself a little faster. If you make a mistake, doesn't matter if you play music for an audience and you're playing music and a mistake happens. It's just a little bump in the road. Doesn't matter. Everybody gets back on looking at the road and the mountain and the lakes and so on. That's the music, not the little bump. Now, of course, if you have too many bumps, then we cannot watch. That's a different issue. But stay on the music, enjoy the journey, and if you have a little bump, if you have a little mistake, doesn't matter. Just get back right on enjoying what you are doing. Okay, so with that, I will now open it for Q&A. So we have had some questions, but please turn on your mic and let me know what goes through your mind, and if you have any questions, I can answer, or at least attempt to answer to them.
Excuse me, sir. Hi, sir.
Yes.
My name is Kavin. I had a question. Has it ever happened to you in a concert? You played very well, but in the next concert you start feeling overconfident that you'll do well. Has it ever happened to you like that?
Then what happens then if I'm overconfident? What do you mean by that?
That means you practice, but you practice average amount, because generally I see in concert the player practices until they know they can do very well in the piece. So if you start getting overconfident, has it ever happened to you by like that you don't practice as much as you would do for an average concert?
That is how old are you?
9.
9. Wow, that's a kind of question that I would imagine would at least come from somebody who's 19. So this is my compliment to you. Great question. So if you don't mind, mute your mic because I'm hearing myself talking back. Yes, it has happened to me. It has happened to many people, I would suppose, because it's also very difficult to be constantly keeping yourself always at, like, practicing at your maximum to keep that like sort of a high level. And it especially happens after, let's say, if I play a concert and there are, several concerts in the row. In the first concert I'm nervous, and the second one I'm less nervous, maybe the third I'm more relaxed. And then when I'm like too relaxed, then my mind starts wandering off and I start making mistakes that are due to the lack of concentration. Not so much a lack of practice, but more to the lack of concentration. So it did not happen to me that I would get overconfident and I would stop practicing for the concert. I would always practice. But a sense of responsibility, of just a sense of little nervousness of the concert, it's always good sort of like to keep you on your toes so that you will do the best, that you don't relax, that you know what you are doing, not to lose the concentration. But I was never like, I would never perform a concert and play a piece that I did not practice for it. Even if I have played it hundreds of times, I would still go through the program, still keep it in my fingers, still practice sufficiently enough to have that confidence that, yes, I have done my work and I have to play. Does that answer it? All right. I heard somebody else wanted to
yes,
ask a
sir.
question.
Yes, sir. Sir, this is Smriti. I just had a small doubt. Suppose, sir, you knew like a whole piece very well, and suddenly you black out on a very small section in the piece, but you know what comes after that. So, sir, do you skip that section or do you try to remember it in a concert?
Just skip it, because if you are trying to remember it, you would probably just sort of like a mumble through it, right? If you don't remember it, you don't remember it. Don't force your mind. You know what I mean? So it would make less of a hiccup if you simply skip and you go on, right? Rather than staying and trying to go through that section. Just think of it again as a movie, right? If you skip, you will go like, oh, so there's something on. I missed this section. It doesn't work. But you would sort of like get back into it, right? It would be momentary, like, oh, something was wrong. Rather than if you're trying to remember and it's, everything is garbled up, it's draw more attention. If you try to fix it in that moment, you're paying too much attention to the problem. And if it's not fixable in that very moment, you are just making the more mess out of it.
Okay.
So just move on to some next section,
Okay, sir, thanks.
I have a question regarding performance. So normally what I've noticed is maybe it's because of the acoustics in the room, or maybe it's because of certain different factors. When I play in front of an audience, I notice that I don't sound the way I sounded in my room, or maybe in this atmosphere or in that environment, and then that kind of irritates me and gets me thinking like, I don't like how I sound right now.
Mhm.
So how would you try to fight your own thoughts regarding, I don't want to sound this way, I want to sound better at this moment.
Acceptance. Acceptance of the limitations of that moment. Meaning that if the room you're playing in it, it's very dry, it's very dread, it's sort of like, you produce a sound and the sound simply drops, that like the room sucks it in,
Yeah.
right? You have to accept it. There's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you cannot change the acoustics. You cannot just call in a crew and go like, hey guys, take all the carpet out and install the tiles because I don't like the way I sound,
Mm.
right? You cannot do that. And thinking about it, knowing at it in your mind, like I don't like the way it sounds, it's really bad acoustics and so on. It doesn't really help you,
Mm-hmm. Not at all.
not at all. So that's what I'm talking about, recognizing what are the things you can do something about, what are the things you cannot do anything about,
Mm.
right? So if you at home have a very, very acoustic room and you really love the way you play, well, then you're setting yourself for a high standard of always expecting that kind of acoustic, and you know that you will not get it.
Mm.
Okay, so maybe it would be better if in the room where you practice, you will make it harsher acoustically,
Mm.
so you don't have that much echo, that it's drier room, so that when you play in a dry room, when you perform, it will not make such a difference. But when you play in an acoustically more pleasant room, it will actually give you a boost.
Mm.
You understand what I mean?
Yes, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah. So in any sort of situation, and I'll tell you another anecdote. I think this was in 1992. When I was in competition performing in La Herradura in Spain, Andre Segovia competition. And we were all complaining, and rightfully so, that we were playing on January 2nd, winter, in southern Spain. Now, winter in southern Spain, it's like winter in Calcutta, more or less. Maybe it was colder there. But in a church, it was actually very cold.
Mm.
So they would bring like a little heater, that would sit behind the chair. So our, rear would get warmed up while our hands would be cold. And we were all complaining how cold it is. And I remember one lady a guitarist who lived there, and she said, well, learn to play with the cold hands. Very simple answer.
Oh.
Right? So I'm like, okay, that's the circumstance. Learn to play with the cold hands. Of course, I'm not going to sound the best I can, but everybody else is in the same situation. Right? And if you play if you have opportunity, think of it this way, perhaps. If you have opportunity to play your guitar, to play your music, and conditions are not the best in terms of acoustics, well, that's simply as it is at that moment. Be thankful that you can exist in that moment as a player, as a guitarist, as a musician, and you can be playing something for an audience. So it's not about you and enjoying yourself to the best of acoustic, uh, conditions that you may have or not, and being irritated, but simply be grateful that you can sort of like communicate, let's say, your humanity to other people, regardless of the circumstances.
I hope I'm not asking too many questions, but I have one more. In a set list, would you always go for the easiest and the most, I mean, let's say, okay, slow doesn't necessarily mean easy, but would you go for the slow pieces and the more relaxed ones in the beginning? Or would you just get done with the most difficult ones in the beginning itself and then, off to a risky start?
Uh, I, I don't want to think about the pieces in presenting them and being done with them, but I do think personally of sort of like a strategically presenting my program. One thing is in the competitions, obviously, a higher stress situation, I would always go with a piece that is more comfortable with me. In the concerts later on, I would also go with the pieces that are more familiar, that I feel more confident, not necessarily that they're technically easy. They could be complex or hard technically, but I feel confident that I can play them because I have played them many times. So, put your best foot forward.
What I mean to say is like you still have the complicated pieces in your set list, but you want to keep the ones that you're most confident with first.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you so much.
Fair doubt.
Hello.
So how do I need to practice if I need to understand the emotions of a piece?
How do you need to practice to understand the emotions of the piece? Is that a question?
Yes, sir.
What is it? What is the piece you're working on right now?
Sir, any piece?
Okay, more specifically, can you tell me what you are playing now?
Like Leo Bravo, sir, 17th number.
Etude number 17?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you look at that etude, and does that etude tell you anything in terms of emotion? Does it evoke anything as you play it? Does
So
it make
first
you
it
think?
goes like it's sad and then it's happy and then again it's sad.
Okay, so I talked about it a little bit before. So you already have something sad and happy. So what are the things when you say sad? What are the things that in your experience, what were the saddest moments that you had in this past year?
You're staying at home?
Just being at home, not being able to go out and to be with your friends or to play or something like that, or see your family, no? Right? So you can think of that. How do I feel when I'm sit at home and I cannot go out? How sad do I feel? And then as you play that part, you think of that. And what were the happiest moments this year for you?
Celebrating my birthday?
Okay, there you are. So think of those two things when you play that piece, right?
Okay, sir.
And then, when you play some other piece, think of other moments, not necessarily the past year, maybe a year before or whenever, as much as you can remember, what are those, your experiences, and link them to the music. Okay? Good question.
So I have a question.
Yes.
My name is Nirav, and I just wanted to know something. There's some competitions which happen like in the early hours, like at 10 a.m. And if you just get up from bed, and like your fingers start to pain. So how do you cope and play the guitar with painful fingers, something like that?
If you don't mind repeating that, I understood that, just the last portion I did not understand. You say when you go to competitions and sometimes you have to play like at 10 a.m.
Yeah, like there are some competitions which may or some recordings which may happen at the early hours, like 12 a.m., 10 a.m. So not 12 a.m., but 12 p.m.
Well, look, at the beginning of this session, right, it was 8 a.m. for me. Now, due to this whole situation that we live in, I don't remember when was the last time I woke up at 7 a.m. It has been, I don't know, at least 6, 7 months. So getting up at this hour wasn't the best hour for me. If you would ask me, I would prefer to do it at 8 p.m. and that all of you get up at 7 a.m. the next day to listen to me. But it's not up to me. It is me that I am sort of like at the service of the festival, of everybody getting together. So I have to accept it. So in my mind, I'm just thinking, I'm getting up at 7 a.m. I know what is it I have to do and I get ready. Now, if I would have to perform, and it has happened a lots of times, again, not necessarily that it's hard. Well, in one way, it's hard to play at 10 a.m. But imagine that, if I travel from here, as I have done many times, and come to India and then, sleep one night and then play. You're playing perhaps at 7 p.m., but for me, that's 6 a.m. back in Chicago. So I haven't adjusted yet. So I'm sleepy. But the whole point is that you sort of like a plan as much as you can, meaning I'm going to go to bed earlier, even if I don't fall asleep, just to rest, just to rest. So don't drive yourself. Don't go like, oh, you know what? I usually don't sleep until 2 a.m. So I'm not going to even bother. I know that I'm not going to sleep. But go to bed early. Go at 9 or 10 a.m. and just rest there. Read, watch movie, whatever. Just be restful. and then set your alarm to wake you up with a sufficient hours so that you can feel energized by the time when it comes to play. And your body will respond. If you put your mind on what you have to do, body will start responding to it. So, just plan it like that.
Thank you so much for that. Really
Sure.
Hello, sir. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Sir, my name is Promit. I hope you are doing well.
Hope you're doing well too. Thank you.
I'm fine too, thank you. I've been writing down a lot of things that you were saying today. So I have two questions. So the first one is, let me tell you about my situation. So let's say there's a performance. So I have to arrive at that place where the performance is happening, let's say 1 or 2 hours before the performance starts. And then like I warm up, then I do some sound check, and let's say this is like 1 or 2 hours before the performance is supposed to start.
Mhm.
And so 2 hours already gone, and then I'm waiting for my turn when I'll perform. So what happens to me during this time is that I get drowsy, I feel sleepy, not really tired, but sleepy. And
Mhm.
at one moment, I get headaches. It's like a pulsating feeling in my head.
Mhm.
It's like not very severe, but it's actually painful. And when
Mhm.
I'm playing guitar in front of people, it's still there. It's maybe not as much extreme, but it's still there. So I would want to know any suggestions so I can improve this condition, because
Very
this
good.
actually hampers my playing a lot. And as when I get home after the performance, I am like, I almost become sick.
Hmm. That's very interesting. Now, have you ever talked to a doctor about that? Because those
No.
symptoms are, I mean, when you're talking about pain, right? That's a sort of like a very physical manifestation of it. I mean, that pulsating feel. Did
No,
you
I
ever talk to a
haven't
doctor? No.
talked with a doctor about that.
I would suggest you do, because maybe there is something in your physical response that consulting with the doctor, they can give some suggestions. Um, does this happen to you at any other situation that it's not related to performing?
No, sir, not really. It
No.
happens. It doesn't happen in any other situation. I have
So
observed that in almost every performance it happens to me.
so you then it would be accurate to assume that a performance or a stress of a performance is a catalyst for that. It's a trigger.
Yes.
Yeah. So how do you, let's examine this in a way, like, what does it mean to you to perform? Does it again, going back to, like, what does goes through your head? Is it something you are looking forward to? And are we talking performances, what, for competitions or for exams, or just recitals, or what kind of performances?
It's just a recital, not competition or exam.
Hmm.
And there's that most of the time there's a lot of people involved
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
audience. Let's say 100 or a bit
Hmm.
more.
Yeah, I got a picture. So what about, I mean, what else goes through your head? Like, as you're getting there and as you're getting to prepare, what goes through your head? Do you start feeling pressure, or that you have to do this performance and that there are people there, and you feel pressure that you have to perform well, and that you have a sense of responsibility, or they are judging you, or they are looking for your mistakes, or they are there to enjoy the music? What goes through your head?
Actually, all of these actually go through my head, sir. You actually named all of them, you know. So
You know,
when I'm sitting there, so I think things like what people might be thinking. What if I forget? I did once have a blackout,
Mhm,
but I have that memory in my mind still, but it's
mhm,
it's not as like so extreme. But I
mhm,
once had a blackout, and when I'm sitting there or when I'm waiting for my turn to perform, so things go on my head, things like what people might think, what if I forget, what if I make a mistake, or if people are judging me, if they feel upset or become disappointed at some mistake I do, things like those.
Um, let me just look. The key question is here, why are you doing this, right? So if you are doing this to enjoy and to convey something to your audience, then you have to change the way you are thinking. And what I just explained, what are the things that our mind is thinking, what are the things we don't want to think, what are the things that we recognize as something that it's negative, and we have to cut that off and focus on the positive. And you're not the only one. This is a very common. And also think it, flip it the other way around, in a sense that if you are an audience, when you go to the concert, are you going there to judge that person, to catch its mistakes, or are you going there to sort of like enjoy what other person can say? So flipping out your mind, focusing on the positive, focusing on the beautiful things, focusing on the music, and recognizing what your mind is doing, and sort of like meditating on it. Have that maybe meditation, guided meditation, or somebody to talk to about these things until you become more familiar with those thoughts and they don't bother you that much anymore.